Hi, everybody. I'm Carole Baskin, and this is Cat Chat Show 52. Today, our guest is the Executive Director at Black Pine Animal Sanctuary, and her name is Lori Gagen. And Lori, I think I've known you since back in the 90s.
I was trying to remember, and this is my prop for the day. This is from I came for a visit, and you took me through the predecessor to Big Cat Rescue, and I think it might have been the early 2000s, but yeah, it's been several years.
Wow. And I'm thinking back then you were a volunteer at Black Pine, and you've been through a huge change in your role there and the role of the sanctuary and everything. So how about telling us how you got started?
Sure. Yes, you're right. I was a volunteer at Black Pine. I'm a lifetime resident of this community, and my husband Dan and I were personal friends, founders of Black Pine, and we all hung out together socially. And so I naturally started volunteering when there were cats involved because I'm a huge cat lover. And one thing has just led to another. But yeah, I have been with Black Pine in some capacity since 1995. I came on full-time as a director of development in 2006.
Wow. Do you have your headset on?
I do.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure I wasn't, because it'll have a feedback that I won't hear until the end if we're not both wearing headsets, so that's good. So tell us how you transitioned from being a volunteer to, what happened in your life. Give me the blow by blow. We've got an hour here to talk about this.
Sure. Well, let's see. They opened sort of a gift shop, a little souvenir area here at the old site, and we can sure talk about that too. The old site is the founder's previous home, and that's where Black Pine was born and raised. And 1995 happened to be a benchmark time because they opened a little gift shop there. And that's kind of how I initially got involved, was just going with Karen Hoig, our founder, to the gift shows and things like that, looking for souvenir merchandise. And I had a background in marketing and advertising and journalism and things like that, so I enjoyed doing those things on the side. That's really my background, is business administration and computer technology. So I was an active volunteer, and as we started becoming a little bit more well-known in our little community, there were more people coming in, more interest, more need for promotional materials. In 1998, I wrote their website in Notepad, and we launched our first website. And one thing just led to another, and then of course comes volunteers. So I was writing how-tos, and I think that's about the time I met you, Carole, was right as we were starting to recognize the need for volunteers and to be able to keep up with the workload. And you were very kind in sharing what you did at Big Cat Rescue, and I probably still have that on the shelves behind me, actually. But we did a lot of document control and writing how-tos, and it just has been a very, very long progression from there to now. But in 2006, by that point I had successfully written a few grants for Black Pine to be able to buy some equipment and things of that nature. And so I thought, I'm going to take a shot at making myself full-time. So I wrote a grant for a development director position with, of course, myself in mind. And that did come to fruition. So in February of 2006, I left my job. I was working for the Fort Wayne Association of Realtors at that time, and I left that job to come here full-time. What I didn't expect to happen was about 3 months later, was to receive a letter from the owner of the property saying, you either need to buy this place or get out, and you have 6 months.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I was not aware of this.
Yeah, well, that led to what we call our relocation project. From 2006 through early 2012, we were in our mode of relocating and rebuilding everything from scratch. So we're past that now. I became executive director in 2008 with another staff change here, change in direction and management, and that's been my role ever since.
When you went through the change in 2006, were you relocating the existing animals, or did you just kind of start over, or what happened there?
Well, we were relocating existing animals. We had just over 80 animals in population here in 2006, and in the course of about front to end, it was about 8 to 10 months of time to develop some of the land here at this location and get some buildings up, some structures up to be able to successfully move everybody. I think we made our last animal move around December 27th of 2006, so it was quite a year. And then needless to say, it took another 3-4 years really to completely rebuild and put permanent habitats out to accompany or to accommodate all of the animals that were just here at that time.
How far away was the first location from the second?
As the crow flies, maybe a mile and a half, not very far.
Oh, good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you had the same community that you were working with, and you kept the same name, I think.
Yes, we did. We did. And as it turned out, our community is really completely in our debt because they are the ones who really came forward. We really went public. We used our local newspaper and said, help! we have 80 plus animals that we are dedicated to taking care of. It really wasn't a question of can we do this, it was how are we going to do this? We have got to do this. We've got to land on our feet for their sake. And the community really stepped up. We actually are in operation on 18 acres that is still owned by Noble County, by our county commissioners. They wrote a 40-year lease at the cost of $1 to utilize this parkland, basically, that was set aside for public use. So that's where we are today. Tax-free and working with our government in a lot of different ways here. Not only do the commissioners have given us a place to be, but our local highway departments we work with for roadkill, for feed. We work with our highway departments and road crews for wood chipping, for composting, and the list goes on and on and on. This is very much a community-involved effort at Black Pine.
Wow. You know, you come from such a different background than most of the people that I know that started sanctuaries. Most of the people that I know that, well, I guess it may be because you didn't start the sanctuary, but most of the people that I know that start sanctuaries are not good at writing grants. They're not good at writing newsletters and doing all of those kinds of things that are so necessary to making a place successful. So it's a tribute to your talents that you were able to make this huge move and keep this going and going so strongly.
Well, thank you. I mean, I do it because initially I did it out of love and respect for people that I cared very much about, the people who did found Black Park or find Black Pine. So it was really kind of a personal reason initially, just I have to help them. But I think as the community took an interest, that turned my attention to being a little bit more serious about making a career of it for myself, because I had already been involved in a lot of community activities, civic organizations, and things like that through working in newspaper, and you know, it just did happen to be a good fit. But yeah, believe me, it's been thrown in my face a few times that I'm not the typical animal background person, you know.
Well, it's a compliment. It's not meant to be thrown in your face.
Talking to.
You know, it's interesting that you said that your initial reason for helping out Black Pine was because of the people involved. And I've heard so many people over the years say that they came here and volunteered to help me. And I find that just amazing, because I think of people, you know, naturally being attracted to the wild animals and wanting to work around them. But it always kind of stuns me when somebody says, well, I'm here to help you. And it's like, oh, I love you.
Yeah, and we need those people. I mean, now that I've been doing this for a while, you need all walks of talents to do what we do. And I absolutely have people here who have always, oh, I wish I would have, oh, I wish I could have, you know, taken the path to be an animal caretaker for a career, and now they're in their 30s or 40s and they're well past what they think is a reasonable time to start that career. So the animals are a draw, but they bring a lot of different talents to the table than our animal keepers might.
You mentioned that you did a lot of drafting of how-tos and manuals and those kinds of things, and that's another thing that I find kind of rare in sanctuaries. You see it in the better sanctuaries now, but you were doing this back in the 90s and early 2000s, which was way ahead of your time.
Well, and that's probably just because of how I grew up in business. I worked in manufacturing for several years, and I worked with quality control departments. I understood ISO 9000 and all of these automotive and appliance industry terms, and it's all about say what you do and how you do it and stick to it, and it's quality control. And I think it was a natural thing for me. That's how I organized anything I was going to do for Black Pine. It had to be organized the way that I knew how to organize it. So yeah, it was kind of a different way to apply it, but certainly applicable to any work that we do. So that was a natural thing for me. I didn't know it was weird at the time. I thought that's how you manage things.
When you made this transition in 2006, were there existing volunteers and staff that came with you, or was there any staff at that time?
Yes, there were, and actually a good number of those people are still with us, very dedicated still today, and that's another thing I think is a little bit different about our organization is nobody had this, and hopefully we're not at the end, but nobody had in mind where we are today at the beginning of all of this. So I think it's interesting. We have built a core group of support staff largely out of volunteers. So we don't employ near as many people, I think, for the population of animals that we have here that a lot of our peer sanctuaries do. In some ways that's a challenge for us because they are volunteers. But we've been very blessed that they have been extremely dedicated, very extraordinary people that serve on our board of directors that are here every week, you know, like clockwork, filling those gaps and leading other people. I think if I were to count them, there are probably about 6 or 7 of those core people that were here going all the way back to 2006 or just shortly after as part of the relocation project.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, that says something when you have people that stick with you for that long. And I really think donors appreciate the extra work that you go to try and utilize volunteer help as opposed to just paying people, because nobody wants to donate to salaries. Even though that's a necessary part of running any kind of a business, they want their money to go to the animal cause, or the animals particularly. And so by utilizing a lot of volunteer help, more of that money goes to the animals. But you're not kidding, it's hard. It's so hard.
It is, and you know, I've learned the hard way, like most everybody probably does, you know, how to do a better job of screening and selecting and recruiting volunteers to make sure you're really getting the right fit for your organization and for your needs. And I have to say, it's kind of like the intake process with animals. I probably say no way more often than I say yes, which is unfortunate, but we just have to keep those quality standards where they are.
And in your case, you rescue all kinds of animals, right?
We do. We have over 50 different species of animals here at Black Pine.
Holy cats. How many animals altogether?
100.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. We have 14 species. 16. I just can't even imagine having to know about 50 species of animals.
Well, it's interesting, and it wasn't something that was necessarily by design at the beginning of all of this journey we've been on. And a lot of people come in and they say, "Oh my gosh, how do you remember 100 different animal biographies and 100 different sets of, or 50 different sets of biofacts?" Well, fortunately, most of us that have been with it have grown with it, so it didn't happen overnight to where we woke up one day and said, "Oh my gosh, I have to talk about 50 different species of animals." So it's been very organic. It's been organic, and there are an awful lot of similarities at the end of the day between some of the species. You know, we have our groups of animals. We have reptiles. We have felines. We have canines. We have primates. So there's enough similarity that it's not as overwhelming as it might sound.
It sounds overwhelming. When I build a cage out here, if it's an open air type cage, I'm looking at that and thinking, I don't know what cats I'd really feel safe putting in there, but if I were like going across species to figure out who would go in there, that would just,
That too is a tribute to the people that have been here before me. I mentioned in 2008 I became director, but for about a 3 or 4 year period of time there, we had a married couple here who came from a zoo background. They worked for a zoo in Kansas for several years together, one in maintenance and habitat design and development, and the other was a lead keeper. So their talents were extremely beneficial to us when we had to start from scratch and really start rebuilding a site to accommodate all these different species. And I think we learned and reached out and collaborated a lot during that process with more traditional zoo environments and staffs. So
Oh.
Yeah, been a big learning curve. There's no question about it. But it's happened slowly and organically, so it hasn't been overwhelming.
Even finding a vet, I found to be very hard when all we had were cat species. And I ended up with a vet who did nothing but domestic cats. And then she worked with our existing vet, and our existing vet does mostly dogs and cats. But when you're talking about all of the different kinds of species that you have, do you have to have different vets, or do you have one vet that has a lot of experience?
Well, we do have one vet who is not driven by his ego at all, which, I'm not saying all veterinarians are, but as we see with a lot of people in professional positions, sometimes they are a little self-centric. And our veterinarian, our primary vet, is not at all. He is the most giving, generous, open person that I think you could possibly meet. And he's willing to collaborate with anybody, and he's the first one to say, hey, I'm not comfortable in this arena. We need to reach out and network and learn more, and he loves to learn, so he spends a great deal of time on the VIN and talking with our local children's zoo veterinarian as a consulting vet, and they have many primates at the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo, so Dr. Smith has been very generous with his time. Our vet has gone to the facility when they've done their preventive care exams and kind of picked up the protocols for primates from the zoo there. We have consulted with black bear vets in Toronto. We have consulted with chimpanzee veterinarians out in Arizona and at the Lincoln Park Zoo. So it is a community. At the end of the day, it's a big community of people that ultimately put it all together. And then our local primary vet basically implements and
Do these vets donate their services, or is there a mix between donated and charged?
I think for about the last 4 years, we have not received any veterinary bills for services for professionals. Yeah, it's all been donated. We do pay at their cost for supplies, for medications. They have hauled equipment back and forth from their clinics to help us out. One of the things that happened just 2 years ago, this is kind of a funny story, we were planning a surgery on Mufasa. I'm sure you probably have seen pictures of Mufasa, the big African lion who lives out here. Mufasa had and he still does actually, have an infected mandible. His previous owner had yanked out a lower canine tooth and left fragments behind. So he struggled with an infection in his mandible for probably getting close to 8 or 9 years now, off and on. We decided it was time to really address that and do a surgery and examine and see what we could do. So that was scheduled, and then along came Tarzan with an infected canine tooth. Tarzan is our chimpanzee. So then we were faced with 2 animals in the course of about a 4-day span there where oh my gosh, this is a lot to take on. And our clinic was brand new. It was not yet furnished. We had a surgical table, but we didn't have any anesthesia equipment in the facility, so we were bringing in all of that equipment. And in the middle of all this chaos, I got a random email from somebody named Ryan. I remember his name was Ryan, and he was wanting to donate some frozen rabbits for feed for the snakes. And I kind of glanced at the signature at the end of his email, and it had stuck in my head. It was Dr. Ryan Rothenbuehler, and I thought, I wonder who that guy was. When all of this really started getting crazy, I thought, I remember seeing an email from a doctor. I'm just going to see what it was. Well, it turns out that Dr. Rothenbuehler, who's a relatively young man, who's younger than I am, is the only board-certified large animal veterinary surgeon in Indiana, and he lives about 4 miles from here. And he's the head equine surgeon at a local Fort Wayne area equine clinic, and they take care of hundreds probably of racehorses all the way from here clear down into Kentucky that are in the racehorsing circuit. So I just shot him an email and said, you wouldn't happen to have a portable x-ray unit? Well, of course I do. I have portable x-ray, I have portable ultrasound, and he ended up coming into this fold as well, and he and Dr. Taylor did those 2 surgeries back to back in a single day.
Oh, wow.
First use of our new clinic, so that was a pretty exciting day. That was a couple of years ago. But it all just sort of happened by chance. Otherwise, had he not said I had rabbits for you, I don't think I'd ever even know he existed. So it was very fortuitous. Yeah.
Man, that's one of the nice things about, you attended a big cat workshop in North Carolina back last November, and there were a number of people from sanctuaries that keep big cats was the purpose of getting all these people together. But I'm just finding it amazing how there are so many resources that we all were able to share with each other at this, I don't know if you can call it a convention, it was smaller than that, but at this workshop. And we never would have known that those resources were available. So we really do need a centralized database of this sort of thing.
I think so too. I'm really excited. I just was speaking with earlier before our interview with some of our board members, and I was actually talking about what you guys have done with your volunteers putting a website together to share resources. I just think it's exactly what we all need. And our veterinarian, we spoke with him and said, you know, how great would it be for you to be able to pick up the phone and call a veterinarian at any of these other big cat sanctuaries and discuss, you know, whatever animal is ailing right now and talk through all that shared experience. So he's excited about it too.
Good. I'd like to make, you know, this was just her first mock-up of the site, but I think that there could be some password protected areas where we could share those resources and not be exposing these people to calls from crazy people.
Yes. Yeah, I think that would be really fabulous. I really do. Because it is such a niche, really. I mean, what we're doing is a small percentage of all of the things that go on in the vet world, so I think it would be great.
You know, I don't think we've mentioned yet, we've kind of hinted at little pieces of it. You're in Indiana. Where is Black Pine Animal Sanctuary located?
We are up in the northeast corner of Indiana, so we are within about an hour's drive of the Michigan border as well as the Ohio border, and about 2 hours from Illinois. And so if you were to draw across on the map between Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, and Indy, you'd probably cross real close to Albion, where we're located.
Albion?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Albion?
You got it, yeah. Tiny little town, about 2,300 people.
That is tiny. I think there's more people than that over at the mall right now.
We talk about that a lot in our world because Big Cat Rescue and so many other of the larger sanctuaries, when I say larger, I say like a lot more money to work with, larger. You know, you do have the benefit of being in much more populated communities. Fort Wayne is our local metro area, which is about 250,000 people. But Fort Wayne is still, by most people's standards, a small town. So at least the mentality is that it's a very small town. It's the second largest city in Indiana, but it's still very rural in every way, median income and so on. So yeah, we don't have a huge metro area to pull from. And the other thing is the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo is one of the top 10 children's zoos in the country. So naturally, animal lovers in that community have been supporting that their lifetime. And here we come along and they're beginning to understand that we have completely different missions, but it's taken a long time for us to not be seen as competitors, so to speak.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, you're right. We are so fortunate. Back when we built this place, we were out in the middle of freaking nowhere, but at least we were only about 15 minutes northwest of the airport, because the airport's that way out on the edge of Tampa. And so because of that, it was easy for us to attract volunteers and later on staff and then visitors, because 15 minutes isn't that far to drive for most people. But we had looked at, back in the 90s, back then we were on 40 acres. Here now we're on 67, but back then we had 600 acres that was about an hour north, and I really wanted to move the sanctuary out there, but I didn't, because I just was so concerned that we wouldn't be able to draw the volunteers or the tourism that we needed to continue to support the sanctuary. So now that I'm surrounded by people, I'm kind of like, man, I wish I had moved back then.
Well, I don't recommend the relocation project.
I can't even begin to imagine what that must be like, because here my dad's built all these cages, so you know there's just no way we could rebuild 100 cages and move, and I'm guessing you'd probably have to build as many if you've got 100 animals. Probably not that many of them live together if there are that many different species.
These are probably, well, they are quite different from just big cat habitats. You know, we have an entire building dedicated to reptiles, and it's very similar to going into any desert house at a zoo. You know, you can imagine it's an enclosed building with jewel case exhibits, so to speak, and that sort of thing. Our primate house is, the building is central in the middle, and that's the winter housing, and that's where all the animals are through our winter months. and then we just simply open doors in their living spaces to go out into habitats that surround the building. So again, that design element was so important to try to get the biggest bang for the space and just be able to manage the animals from central locations. I sort of felt the same concept down at the Center for Great Apes when I met Patty Reagan down there, where they have central keeping areas and everything spans out from it, and that's kind of how we're set up. So.
And did you have the benefit of seeing that before you built it, or did you see it afterwards and went, "Wow, I'm glad we did it this way"?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, I would definitely credit my predecessors who were here as colleagues of mine at the time, who really did most of that design work, and they had seen it. They definitely had seen it, and then since then we've. It's just live and learn, I guess, more than anything. Every time we have something new to add, we certainly have a lot more considerations for those types of things, traffic flow and space, and what are we going to do after this? We've got more to do, so how are we going to use the space? But sadly, I'm surprised how quickly we're becoming landlocked in this 18 acres, because I felt like when we moved here that was huge, but clearly it's really not that huge when you start adding animals.
And so if the 18 acres that you're on, did you say 14 of it is supplied by the county?
No, all of it is. It's all county.
So when you build a building, you're having to build it on county-owned lands?
We are. Our buildings are pretty utilitarian, and our agreement with our lease is that if it's going to be valued at $50,000 or more, then we have to run it past them for approval. But as you can imagine, a lot of our big cat, but out central in the big cat area facility where we have shared dens, those dens are not $50,000 structures. So those kinds of things go up without any county approval. The things that they have had to approve are things like our resource center, which is where I'm sitting here, this training room, and it's also our gift shop and point of admissions for our visitors. This had to be approved. Our primate house was approved. The reptile house was approved. But everything else has pretty much fallen under that threshold. So it doesn't take much.
Did you guys build this stuff yourself, or did you have to hire outside people?
Some of both. Most everything that we 3 years was done by ourselves with volunteers. And as we've grown and awareness has raised further and further, we've had more and more very generous donors who have helped, fund budgets that could include contract labor. So the last few projects have been done by subcontractors.
Do you mind me asking what your annual budget is currently?
As you know, I should be able to answer that right off the top of my head, and I know historically that when I answer it, I'm always off.
I know how that goes.
It's really hard. I'll explain why that's so hard for an executive director, because I should know that answer very easily. What's difficult is the relocation project that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years is completely skews everything about our budget versus our operating budget, what it takes to feed and take care of the animals on an annual basis. So this is the first year since 2000, well, really in the history of Black Pine, this is the first year we've been able to have a general operating budget that we all know and understand, and then we have a capital budget that is separate for any of these construction-related activities. So it's really hard for me to sometimes separate that all in my head with a simple question, but I believe I would be accurate in saying it's about $240,000 a year right in that range. It's not very much, really, considering everything, and that's just a credit to all of the donor-provided food, and we do carcass fees, so that keeps our meat budget down significantly. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into that supplements that. If we had to out-of-pocket everything, I'm sure it would be at least $350,000 to $400,000 a year.
Do you have to do your own slaughtering when it's whole carcass?
We do. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I did. The last time I slaughtered an animal was on Christmas Eve. Gosh, it must have been back in the 90s. A deer had been hit by a car, and the sheriff's department killed it on the spot and brought it to us. And back then, we would feed roadkill. But I slaughtered that deer, and I was just like, I'm never doing this again, ever. This is just it. And so we've purchased all of our food since then. But I can't even imagine how hard that must be, because it took me all night.
Well, it's funny, one of the working groups that is coming out of this sanctuary workshop community that we are all a part of now, that's one of the reasons I offered up our lead keeper, Amy Hartzell, as a resource for the working group talking about feeding and nutrition, because we are masters of slaughtering cows, horses, and deer for feed for these big cats. We probably have about a half a dozen people on our core staff here that can completely process a white-tailed deer in about 15 minutes for feed.
No way!
Yeah.
15 minutes. Dang.
Do videos for everybody. Yeah, we've got 2 guys that process cows. We're in the middle of dairy country, and mostly dairy cows versus cattle or beef cows, but we have one of the largest dairy operations nearby, and they have started donating their dairy cows to us when they lose them. And we now have a crew of 2 who can process 1,600 pound cow in about 3 hours.
That's going to take some really heavy duty equipment just to get an animal that size up off the ground.
It's really about skill, like knowing where to cut. They don't use a huge amount of equipment. I mean, we do have a skid loader that we use to hoist that large of an animal. But we actually have an enclosed area for butchering the white-tailed deer right inside the commissary facility here. So it's completely hosed in a clean room that can be hosed down. And I mean, literally front to end, it's maybe a half an hour, 40 minutes from front to finish.
About how much food do you store, or do you feed it all pretty much fresh?
Oh, no, we have a huge walk-in. We have about a 16-foot walk-in freezer back here. We probably... I'm going to say on average we might have 2,000 to 2,500 pounds of meat running through, routinely. We try to keep a backlog of meat. We do supplement. We do purchase on occasion poultry. We have a lot of local poultry farms, so we'll buy quarter chickens. We also get a lot of donated meat through Walmart, although not from the recycling system, the retail end of Walmart. I know that a lot of the sanctuaries are getting meat from Walmart retails. But ours is coming pre-retail distribution through a Walmart distribution center, so we get a lot of meat from them. In fact, we just got like 1,200 pounds of whole chickens this past week from Walmart. So,
I was talking to somebody at another sanctuary, and they were saying that is so much work with the Walmart food because there's only like 20% of it that is usable, and you have to pick through to find that 20%. Are you finding that same ratio?
No, because what we're doing is not that program that they're talking about. They're talking about going to the retail store and picking up barrels of food that's coming out of the retail store. What we're picking up is from their gigantic warehouse where all of the Walmart trucks come in and load up to ship to the retail location. So we're getting bulk cases, not just meat, because we do have all these other species to feed. Most of what we pick up from the distribution center is actually produce versus meat, but when they do have meat, it's usually very large volume of meat.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're just fortunate that for some reason, when they first built the distribution center up here in Northeast Indiana, they contacted farmers in the area, because in other regions of the country, that food is often donated to hog farmers, but there was nobody that signed up here for some reason. So we've been on this program for many, many years, and it is a godsend. I don't know what we would do without it. It's a lot of food.
Yeah, a lot of food. You turned us on to, we used to feed Natural Balance, and we were just heartbroken when they sold to Del Monte, and Del Monte shut down the whole part of that plant. So I think it was the workshop that I had asked who uses what, and you had turned us on to AAA, which you're not using now, but you said you had used, and we've been very happy with that product.
Mm-hmm. We like the product a lot, too. It's just a lot more expensive for us than our other options, so that's why we very often. Yeah.
It's ghastly. It's not as bad as Natural Balance price-wise, but it's ghastly when you're talking the kind of volume that we feed, which is like 500 pounds a day.
Yeah.
Do you have a rough idea of how many pounds a day you feed?
I think on average it's about 125 pounds a day. It's not as much as a lot of the cat sanctuaries for sure, but I think it's around 125 a day on average.
I would think that with all those other types of animals that eat produce and those kinds of foods, that would be even more labor intensive to try and get that kind of a diet out every single day.
Yeah, I guess I don't really have anything to compare it to, so it's just part of our day. But I can tell you our diet prep time, if we have a rookie, somebody new coming in and learning diet prep, it can take them 3 or 4 hours a day to prepare all of the diets for everybody. But somebody who's experienced and knows and has been doing it for a while can finish our diet prep in about an hour and a half. So it's not horrible. Twice a week we do have a lot of intense time, probably another 2 to 3 hours on those days when produce is coming in, just to sort and purge and organize and break down boxes and all the stuff that goes with it. But compared to what it would cost us to order that wholesale and buy it, it's just unbelievable how much value there is to those donations. Yeah, very generous.
I know that there's never a typical day at a sanctuary, but as typical as you could outline it, like over the average of a course of a year, can you tell us like when your day starts and what you do throughout the day and when your day ends?
Yeah. I feel like I'm doing an intern interview with you. I will our day falls. We start our day. We have a lead person, myself, or one of the 2 other paid staff members that are lead people will come in. Usually, I personally am up at 6 o'clock in the morning making the staff schedule for the day. Not everybody probably is up at that hour doing it. But in any event, we're here by about 7:45 in the morning, laying out the schedule, putting out the clipboards with all of our checklists for the day for the husbandry routines. 8 o'clock is when the rest of the staff arrives. We'll spend about 2 to 2.5 hours with 2 teams of animal caregivers going, one to the primate house to take care of birds and primates and some small mammals. The other one typically is going to what we call the West End, and they're taking care of some of the animals in the holding facility, which right now includes 2 tigers. We have 6 black bears on that end of the facility, wolves and foxes. And so, as it turns out, just by the way time works here and what's assigned, at about 10:30 or so, they're coming back in from that first round, taking a break, reloading, and ready to go out for round 2. Round 2 is going to be another couple of hours. 1 team in the reptile house, 1 team taking care of grazing animals. And then we've got a senior keeper team that will also head out and take care of big cats, typically in the early afternoon. We take care of the rest of the large carnivores. So.
Now, when you say take care of, you're talking about the feeding and cleaning the bowls and that sort of thing? Or are you talking, well,
yes.
I guess that's what I'm asking. Are you feeding then or are you cleaning then?
Our husband routine is the same across the board. We are doing visual observation and note-taking on any concerns there. We are cleaning watering buckets, bottles, Lixit bottles, whatever it might be for that animal, and refilling. We are cleaning habitat. With things like birds and primates, it is literally a dry clean followed by a wet clean top to bottom every day. Reptiles, depends on the animal. Obviously, reptiles don't require the same amount of daily attention that some of the other species do, but in total, it's about an hour and a half of feeding the herbivores in there and looking after the snakes and things. So cleaning, supplements. Any dietary supplements or veterinary prescribed medications, those types of things are all delivered at that same time that we're taking care of cleaning and feeding. So all of that routine, I guess you could say, takes place in each of those areas as I described. We actually do clean our carnivore habitats and dens inside and out every day. So I know a lot of places don't necessarily scoop poop every day. We have just really started considering doing that, spreading ourselves a little bit further to do other things versus every single day. You lock an animal down, go in, get 2 or 3 things off the ground, and then you've got all that time involved in doing that. So we're learning how to maybe better use our time, but we're very, very clean facility for sure. Husbandry, then in total, we're pretty much done with everything. Direct animal care is usually done by about between 2 and 3 o'clock. We also have to do diet prep, so that can happen both in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on how many people are here. But ultimately, we're done with diet prep by about 3:30 in the afternoon, and that kicks into housekeeping time. So we're emptying trash and taking out compost and cleaning up after ourselves and replenishing supplies throughout the compound, that sort of thing, up until around 4. And then from 4 to 5, we do have animals that have their second meals for the day. Some of the primates and birds and things eat twice a day. So it's time to go back for round 2 in some of those areas.
Wow.
and that wraps up our day. Now, if we have extra people, what I just described requires at least 4 people here to do all of that. Most days we have more than 4 people here, so if we have 5 or 6 or 7 of us here, then we're also doing a lot more enrichment. Obviously, we're extending our afternoon hours to enrichment and organizing and perhaps doing maintenance projects and that sort of thing too. And when we're open, the whole summertime when we're open to the public adds a whole other facet of work to do. So our staff increases almost double for the summer months.
And that's what I was going to ask. I didn't know if you did tours or not. So you do tours?
Mm-hmm. We do private tours only by appointment from October through April. And those are pretty few and far between when the snow's flying here. We don't get a whole lot of people coming out in the wintertime, but if we have a mild sunny day, we do have inquiries. Sorry, I'm losing my earbuds here. But from May through September, we are open a lot and have both walk-in visitation and tours to deal with, as well as field trips and things of that nature too.
We started using a service last year called Zerv. It actually happened because one of our staff quit. She had a family emergency and had to go help run the family business. And when she quit, what we did was, instead of hiring another person, we just took her job and we divided it among everybody. And I had some people that wanted to change what their jobs were, so it was like, all right, everybody give me a list of what you want to do, and we'll try to reassign everything. And the one thing that nobody wanted to do was to answer the phone and deal with reservations for tours. Mm-hmm. And so I went to, I built our website, so I built out this whole thing through Event Espresso, where people could go online and pay for their tour and automate the whole system since nobody wanted to do it. But I was still going to have to answer the phone. And about 3 days after I went live with that service, Zerv called me and said, we'd like to show you what we've got. And they told me what they did. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing this. I just finished weeks building out this Event Espresso site. And they just wouldn't relent. They insisted I see what they do. And then finally at the end of it, I said, well, who answers the phone? And they said, do you want us to answer the phone? I'm like, yes, you answer the phone. We got a deal. And so now they take care of all of our reservations. And what happened in that first year is it tripled our visitation. We had to raise our prices just to keep more people from coming because we can't deal with any more people. So if you get to the point where you're expanding and thinking, man, I don't want to deal with these reservations anymore, I would certainly recommend Zerv.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I actually have brought your facility up as an example a couple of times to some of the board members when we've talked about, I mean, we get field trip requests where they say we've got 104 children and 45 adults, and I say, no, that can't happen here. And we're thinking about how do we limit it without losing that support, you know? So yeah, the more sophisticated and well-known we become, the more we're going to have to deal with deciding how to manage that, for sure.
There's always growing pains.
Yeah, which I'm grateful for. I guess that's a good thing, ultimately. But it's a lot to keep up with, for sure.
You mentioned something I almost never hear, and I'm so impressed that you do this. We do it, obviously, but you have criteria that you, when somebody calls you and says, I want to get rid of this orangutan, you've got criteria that you compare that against, and you don't make that decision, I'm guessing, on emotion. You make it on, does it fit all of the criteria? Can you share with us how you came up with that and what some of your criteria is?
Sure. How we came up with it, I think, was just experience, you know, and discussing. There certainly was a point in time, not all that many years ago, where we really had to say, okay, are we really the right facility for a bunny rabbit? You know, when somebody has a pet rabbit at home. I mean, we did have 2 rabbits in inventory at one point here that lived very long, happy lives with us, but as they passed away, it's that those kinds of conversations have had to have been had lately to say, where is our focus? Let's tune in a little bit and say, where are we best serving animals? So that's been part of it. It's just the learning curve. I think, like many founders, our founders used to say yes to almost everything, and then eventually there were way too many requests to be able to say yes. And as we started having to say no, we decided we really need to be upfront with people and not run the risk of saying, yes to John and no to Sue, and then yes to Joe for the same animals, and not really have a reason why we said no to her and yes to him, other than the mood I was in, or that animal was cute, or whatever it might have been. So yeah, that came out of experience. It also came out of business-minded people who serve on our board of directors, who approach things kind of like I approach things and say, well, we just need to have some criteria. That's just how you do things. So our criteria really is, the first one is we will not accept a request to take in an animal from anybody other than the responsible party for that animal. In other words, if Linda calls because her neighbor John has a tiger in his backyard and Linda wants us to take that tiger, that's not our business. So if John calls us about his pet tiger and wants us to take his tiger, then we'll have a conversation if John's the owner. So that's one of the criteria. If somebody else does call and they're not the primary owner, we do try to direct them to what legal resources are available to, file a complaint or follow it up with the law, but that's the extent of our involvement. The second criteria is really, why does it really need a home? We've actually talked quite a few people into keeping their animals when it comes down to a conversation of, I have the means to take care of it, I just feel bad because I can't go in the cage with it anymore and it's lonely. Or
I hear that one all the time.
For us, if you have the means, and some of these people have had more means than we have had to consider taking care of their animal, so I've been able to talk to them, or we've been able to talk to them and say, why would you want to rip this animal away from the only family it has ever known based on how you feel? How does the animal feel? Well, the animal doesn't want me to come in its cage anymore, and it's like, that's okay. It's not going to want me to come in its cage either when it gets here. So I would say one is just a really true heart-to-heart conversation about why the animal needs to be rehomed. And the other thing it comes down to is, well, I just don't want to do it anymore. And sometimes we can explain to people that, tough bananas, you put yourself in that situation, you have a responsibility. And sometimes that responsibility might be another 3 or 4 years based on that animal's lifespan. Big deal in the course of your life. So, buck up and do it. So that's kind of part of the criteria. Those are the two main things. The rest of the criteria has to do with our abilities, not necessarily the person giving up the animal. So it has to do with our budget and our resources and our space and our time and everything it's going to take to commit to that animal for the rest of its life.
And that's something you really can't determine because you don't know how long your animals will live. Even when we think we know the lifespans of these animals, they surprise us and live way beyond that.
Yeah, sure. But you can have a pretty good idea. There are some real simple cases. For example, sulcata tortoises that can live, 60, 80 years. We are not going to take any more sulcata tortoises, period. So some of the decisions are pretty easy to make. If one of them happens to pass away at a young age and we have a vacancy, then that'll be opened up. And I say a lot of times when people ask me on tours, how do you decide which ones to take? Sometimes it really is kind of luck of the draw for somebody. If they happen to call at the right time, and we just lost a bobcat and I have a vacant bobcat habitat, the next person who calls me with a bobcat's probably going to get a yes. So luck of the draw plays a part too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But all of our decisions go in front of a group of people. We have a healthcare committee that includes all of our paid keeper staff and myself. And then some of those core people I mentioned before that have been with us for years that are senior level keepers here that take care of the place on a day-to-day basis with us. We'll sit down and discuss it as a team because it really falls on our shoulders to take care of the animal. We'll make a recommendation to our board, and our board has the ultimate yay or nay on any intake.
Do you guys have a intern program?
We do, yeah.
How do you do that without being able to provide housing?
Well, we actually do provide housing now. We have an apartment here in town, a 2-bedroom apartment that's not even a mile from here, and budget and take care of the expenses for that apartment. So that has helped us to keep the intern positions filled. But even above and beyond that, we have a pretty good pool of good candidates that live within a commuting distance, partly due to Purdue University being here in Indiana. Purdue's a huge agriculture life sciences university. So we get a lot of pre-vet students and biology students from area universities that can commute. So it's I think we've probably at about 80 people have gone through our internship program by now.
Wow, that's wonderful. How long are they interns for?
It's a bare minimum of 8 weeks, and I can usually talk them into 10 weeks, and sometimes they'll stay 12 weeks on average, yeah.
And you mentioned that you have a high percentage of volunteers to staff. How many staff and how many volunteers?
There are just 2 of us here, full-time paid staff, myself and my lead keeper, Amy. And then we have another part-time keeper that works about 20 hours a week. And then we have a part-time assistant manager who works about 20 hours a week. That is our paid staff. And then in addition to that, we've probably got 3 to 5 volunteers here on a daily basis. Our total volunteer roster is about 35 people.
And of that 35, is it kind of the 80-20 rule as far as 20% of the volunteers do 80% of the work?
Yeah, I'd say it probably is. Hadn't thought about it, but yeah, it probably is. Yeah.
Seems like it's always that way.
Yeah, we have those volunteers, some of which just are able to be here, once every couple of months for half a day, things like that. But some of those people have been with us for 6, 7, 8 years too, so still dedicated.
Are you guys able to do any kind of outreach to schools, or are they within a decent driving distance?
We used to do a lot of traveling to schools, and that has tapered off over the years just because the amount of time and effort, and also our animal population has changed. As I mentioned, no more bunny rabbits and more tigers. We really don't have a lot of outreach that we can take into the schools, so to speak. So we don't do as much as we used to. And I think we've seen a pretty dramatic increase consistently with the number of schools coming here. So if we can do the programs here, we'd much prefer to do that. But we do go out and do Speakers Bureau presentations to civic organizations. We set up and do educational things at a pet expo here in Northeast Indiana. This year, for the first time, we're going to a swap meet 4 times to set up an educational handout booth because they sell foxes and parrots, things like that there, and it's just literally about 3 miles from us. So we are going to go and hopefully do some education. Our first one is this Saturday, so a week from today. Yeah.
Oh, good luck to you.
Yeah,
it's so hard when you go into a situation like that and people are just oohing and awing over these wild animals, and it's like, no, they don't belong in a swap meet.
Yeah. So we're hoping to be respectful and just educate, let people know what they're in for, and if they really, really, really have to buy a pet fox, we want to make sure they have information to know what they're getting into. So.
Wow. Do you have trouble with people trying to dump domestic animals at your gates?
No. No, and I've heard horror stories about people bringing non-domestic animals and dumping them at people's gates, and fortunately that has not happened either. I really hope it doesn't. We haven't had that issue.
The most unusual animal to be left at our gate was a guy called me and he said, "I'm leaving an African civet at your front gate," and I was like, there's no way you own an African civet. And I'll be danged. I've only ever seen 2 in my entire life, and this guy dumped off an African civet at the front gate.
We actually had an African civet years ago at Black Pine. Funny you would say that. Yeah, I don't know what its origins were. I have no idea. But it lived here for a while.
So odd. The palm civets are pretty common, but those African civets are huge. It's scary. And why anybody would think that was going to make a good pet? It's like, it looks like a freaking hyena.
People have different tastes, that's for sure.
What do you see as the future for Black Pine? Where would you like to be 5 years from now?
Well, I would like to be a little bit further down that path of education, for sure. I think we've really started to make an impact in our neck of the woods, so to speak, and doing more advocating, really public advocating and a little bit more involved in politics to a point. We don't want to get too deep into that and get tied up in it. But I think that path will continue to where we'll be doing a lot more education, and I don't see us being able to just continue taking more and more and more animals. So we're going to have to really look at our budget and figure out what our total capacity opportunity is on that front, and that's part of our ongoing strategic planning. Really, aside from that, I think probably more of the same. I'm hoping that we'll continue to see things like the legislation changing to where our role does change, and it's not constantly building habitats and maybe more outreach and education and impactful exhibits for those that do come and visit and learn. So that's, yeah.
Where would you say, not the dollar figures, but maybe the percentage, where would you say the percentages of your income come from as far as like tour revenue, donations, grants, if you do grants anymore? What would be your breakdown in an average year? I know it changes a lot.
Yeah. The last time I looked at that, which really wasn't all that long ago because I'm always looking for grant opportunities and those are common questions, I think we were at around between 50 and 60% of our income is what we would call gate income, so people coming through our gates for whatever program. That can include private tours and regular guided tours and kids camp programs and things like that. So between 50 and 60%. About 25 to 30% has been merchandise and just resales of souvenirs and things like that. That's kind of a budgeted number for this year because we have an all-new space. This is the first time since 2006 we've had an indoor space to put any kind of souvenirs in. So
really? Wow. And you still make 25% when you're doing this outside?
Are projected for this year. We think we're going to do probably 20 to 25% to be more realistic about merchandise sales this year.
Nice.
Around 12 to 15% is just what we would call fundraising activities. Things like we do a beer tasting, we do a wine tasting, we do a car show, classic car show. So things of that sort. We have about 10 or 11 fundraising events that we do every year. One thing we don't do at Black Pine, we don't have the big 1 or 2 year gala auction type events here, partly because we are in such a rural community and there is so much of that type of fundraising that happens in Fort Wayne that we're just not really sure we have enough of a niche to make that big of a bang. So I don't think we'll probably go that route. We do a lot of little things. And then the rest of it is private and individual donations, really, just sponsorships and out-of-pocket donations. We don't include grants in our income, so if we're able to get a grant or write a grant and be successful, that's kind of over and above what we're counting on. So we don't use grant money to fund our regular general operating expenses at all.
What about bequests? Do you receive bequests?
We're just starting to. That's really just beginning to kind of come into our possible future. Yeah.
It's a matter of maturity of the sanctuary, I think. Once you've been around for a certain amount of time, your donors start dying, and that's when the bequests start coming in. But that's one that you really can't budget anything with because you have no idea from year to year what that's going to be.
We had our first bequest this past year. We had a family, an elderly couple that passed away and donated to us, and that was a huge part of the ability for us to house so many more cats from Ohio. When we first committed to 4 more cats, and now we've committed to 2 more cats. So that is really what made that possible. And it's the first time we've really been able to establish some capital, I guess, rainy day funds to make sure that we've got a little bit of cushion. You know, we've been month to month for many, many, many years, and this is the first time going into this year's budget that we have a little bit of a breathing room to.
Oh, good. It's so important.
It is. It is.
We made a conscious effort back when my husband joined us. He was a Hartford MBA, and we had never broken even. We had never come anywhere within $160,000 of breaking even. So my real estate business was what had been funding that shortfall. But one of the things that he wanted to figure out was if we had another 9/11 and there were no donations coming in, there's no tourism, what would it cost us to take care of the existing animals that we have through the end of their projected lives? And at that time, which was like back in 2004, I think, that number was $3.5 million. And so we started trying to set aside $3.5 million by just every dollar we could sock aside for that, we would put into an endowment fund that we have at the Community Foundation and into reserves. And we're getting really close now to being able to do that. But you can't do it as long as you can't, as long as all the money that's coming in is feeding the cats or the animals in your case, then it's really hard to set that aside for that breathing room that you really need if something horrible happens.
Mm-hmm. And we do have an endowment fund too, so I'm hoping that, to your point, as we mature and we keep moving down this path, that we'll see that grow. And I expect that we will. It takes a long time to, in a rural community like this, to get people to A, know you're here, B, get it, what we're doing. And we've really, I think just in the last couple of years, have really passed that hurdle of getting people to understand what it is we're doing here and see it differently than it's just an entertainment venue. That's not how we want to be seen, and it's taken some time to get to that point.
I'm thinking you came to our fur ball one year. Did you? No? You are not missing a thing by not doing a big gala. That is a tremendous amount of work and just not worth it. It's just not worth it. Everybody loved the fur ball. The people who came to it, the people who did it, were just exhausted by the end. But it could generate maybe $80,000 to $100,000 net, but it took us a good 10 months out of the year to pull it off. And we decided a few years ago we really want to devote every minute that we legally can to ending the trade in these cats through legislation. And we can't do that if we're planning a huge party every year. So we haven't done it in like 4 years, and we haven't missed it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we've dipped our toes in the water a few times on a few different types of things and tried to do fundraising events at outside venues, not here. We didn't really have the facility to have anything upscale here. And they just were a bust. I mean, we didn't lose money, but we never came out of it going, oh, that was great.
Let's do it again. No, that never happens.
I've learned that we need to do what we do here, where people can see the animals and we can talk to them about the animals. That's really why they support us. They want to come and hear those stories and see those animals and see them be happy and healthy. That's what brings them here. So we do better in 3 hours in an afternoon in February with a cup of hot cocoa for everybody. Planning a big night out in Fort Wayne in a venue. So
wow.
We have done better at 3 hours in February with animals. So that's probably more of the same to come.
Well, Lori, it has been an hour. Can you believe that?
That's amazing.
It is amazing. What would you like everybody to know about you or Black Pine Animal Sanctuary that we did not cover?
Oh, gosh.
Bug in here.
I feel like we covered everything. I don't know. I guess I could talk a little bit about maybe some of the more high-profile cases we've been involved in. I think a lot of the people that watch Cat Chat probably have heard a lot of these stories. I know when you interviewed Diane Gustafson, she touched on some of them that have happened here in Indiana. But
oh yeah, tell us about that.
Well, you know, one of the rescues that comes to mind is the infamous Dennis Hill, who is the subject of The Tiger Next Door, the documentary film. We do have 3 of his cats here, Darlie, Montrose, and Luna, and they're doing so well, and it's so fun to see them every day being so happy because they really came from some rough conditions, really, really tough conditions, and they're very, very interested cats. They have little fear of people. They're not upset to see visitors, which is always nice. They're actually very engaged to see people come through here. The other interesting one was I was trying to think of the name. The name is escaping me. Oh, Rob Craig at Great Cats of Indiana. Rob was quite a character too, and we've got 10 of his almost 40 animals. So about a quarter of his animals actually live here at Black Pine now. We have wolves and black, a cougar, and Mufasa the lion are all from that location. So bringing canines in was a new experience for us, and shortly after the wolves came in, we took in foxes from 4 different people. So those have been new additions for us, and very interesting in contrast to the felines for sure.
I bet they're hard to house given the way they dig.
You know, it's funny though, so many things can be attributed to where they came from. I don't think the wolves have any desire to dig out of the house they're in. They dig holes, but they don't dig holes to try to get out. They came from a family of 6 living in a space that was about 20 feet by 30 feet on concrete. Now they have a very large, probably quarter of an acre in the woods, and they're perfectly content just playing and laying in the sun and rolling in the shade, and so we don't really see too much of that behavior at all.
And if people don't know, they can go online and search, but Dennis Hill, he was in Flat Rock, Indiana. That was the filthiest conditions I have ever seen animals in my life. And then the Great Cats of Indiana, those were such small, barren, like, what do they call those? Corn cribs that they were keeping those animals in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were 2 really rough circumstances for sure. And I think outside of those 2 high-profile rescues, I guess you could say, most of the other animal residents here have really come from just private individuals very quietly they have been surrendered voluntarily. So there have, for Black Pines, his story, not too many really big high-profile, mass hoarding situations or anything of that nature. It's just been very organic and a slow growth in population, one here, one there. But yeah, I think
it's smart to do it that way. You get in too many at one time, and these places go bust.
Yeah. I've often felt kind of guilty and a little sad that we were not really around and mature enough to be part of the rescue from all of the animals from WAO, but at the same time, we were not prepared to be participating at that time either. So, everything happens in its due time, I guess. But I think Black Pines definitely come a long, long way over the last decade. Really, in many ways, night and day from where it began. And I'm happy to say that at least one of the founders is still with us here side by side. Karen is here and active, and very proud of what everybody's accomplished here. So it's
how wonderful.
That she had the heart and mind to start it to begin with.
Well, I'm so glad you guys are part of the coalition, and I really look forward to getting to know you better over the coming years. And I thank you so much for taking out an hour of your day. I know how busy it must be around the sanctuary when there's 5 or 6 of you doing all the work. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure, and I enjoyed it, and appreciate being a part of it too. So thank you for having me.
I'll put it in the show notes and at the bottom of the video here, but can you call out to everybody your website address?
Yes, it's blackpine.org.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been Cat Chat 52 with Lori Gagen from Black Pine Animal Sanctuary. And you can find us in iTunes, or you can find us on Stitcher Radio. And if you go to either one of those, if you leave a review saying that you liked what you heard, that helps other people hear about us, and so we can have more great guests like Lori. So thank you, everybody. Bye.